is a plan. And the plan isn't for the president to say that he's a perfect physical specimen. Did he say specimen? Maybe I could agree with that. And young. He said he was young. That his disassociation from reality would be funny if it weren't so deadly. And his people, these enablers around who are enabling death, the death toll to rise. We have to shed a bright light on what has been possible for months that they chose to ignore because of their contempt for Congress and their disdain for governance. And so that's why, if there's one thing that has to be in this bill that he has never made as a priority, it's crushing the virus. I think that the public needs to know the health condition of the president. Let us see a date, a time, when you last tested negative before you admitted to this virus. Tomorrow, by the way, come here tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment. Come here tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the 25th Amendment.
Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. I am your host, Thorpe. Maple Thorpe. Today's episode involves mystery and intrigue, and mysterious, intriguing things. So, do the thing with the greeting of the neighbors and the bumping of the fists and the stretching of the biceps femoris. And let's begin. All right, first things first, I want to talk about the video that you just saw from the other day. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pants Pelosi, in her fancy, citrusy little orange get-up, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And she's coming out talking about coronavirus relief. She's over here saying the president's not going to work with anybody. He doesn't care about the American people. Meanwhile, POTUS is over here saying, what? Ready to go? I'm ready to sign. What's up? Let's do it. And then Nancy's like, don't touch me. And POTUS is like, I'm not touching you. And Nancy's like, don't touch me. And POTUS is like, I'm not touching you. Anyway, this was just a platform for her to come out and talk about the 25th Amendment, which is something that they are going to try and invoke. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but she made that little threat. She used that little finger point of hers, which wasn't a really intimidating finger point. It was more like I got carpal tunnel syndrome finger point. It was pretty weak. Remember when Rafael Palmeiro did the finger point? That was kind of weak too. And I liked Rafael Palmeiro. He was a baseball player. He was doing steroids. And I don't really think anybody cared because they were all slugging homers. Nobody really cared. But they had to go testify, and he stuck his finger at Congress and he was like, I did not do the steroids. And everyone was like, you totally did the steroids. Nobody really cared. They should have just made a league where everybody was allowed to do steroids. That way everybody could be walking around like a jacked up water buffalo. But Nancy Pelosi is not a jacked up water buffalo. She's just jacked up. Speaking of jacked up, that face mask, just take it off, Nancy. All right, we get it. You're trying to make a point with your little papers, but your skull is shrunk in so much, the mask no longer wants to sit on your face. Just take the dang thing off. You're trying to lead the country, and you're wearing a diaper on your face. Just stop it. And she showed up with this numpty, Jamie Raskin, who's just asking about the 25th Amendment. He was about as convincing as a teenager trying to convince their parents that they need to go to Tijuana for the weekend with that guy that they just met online. Well, let's take a look at that video.
You said flat out, this legislation is not about President Trump. So why introduce it now?
Well, it isn't about President Trump. It's about the Constitution of the United States, the continuity of government. And again, if it were about Trump, we wouldn't do it, because the fact is this would protect President Trump, because it says it isn't about anybody's opinion of his behavior. It has a formula of healthcare professionals and statespersons chosen equally by Democrats and Republicans, with a strong role for the vice president in what would happen should the president become incapacitated. Why now? Because this is part of our agenda for the people. For the people, we're going to lower the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and that a bill has been passed by the House. For the people, we're going to increase their paychecks by building the infrastructure of America, and that bill, moving forward, has passed the House. This is our For the People agenda. Clarity in Government, H.R. 1, which has passed the House, but without this. The Constitution In Article 20, in Amendment 25th Amendment, gives Congress the power to establish how this transfer of power would take place. Just envision a situation where a president might become incapacitated, bumping a head, a stroke, whatever it happens to be, even temporarily. This says how the process could go forward. There are other ways to do it within the the amendment, but this one was left blank, the fourth provision of the bill, and we're putting that forth. And we're so pleased to have Jamie Raskin, who is a constitutional scholar, who has introduced this legislation. Actually, he's introduced it a while ago, and now reintroducing it because of so many questions about what happens. What happens? Well, we have a path by way of the Constitution as to what happens.
So to be clear, because a lot of folks are wondering, the Speaker of the House does not think at this point that the President of the United States should transfer power.
No, I do think the President should.
So that's exactly what you're trying to do. I know it, you know it, Pelosi knows it, everybody knows it. And while they spent the last few weeks crying about the appointment of Justice Amy Coney Barrett happening right before elections, now they're perfectly happy to try and pull this stunt once again right before the elections. Well, this should come as no surprise, and I do believe that there is a side event, and I think many of you do too. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But to give you a little perspective as to why Jamie Raskin is a part of this, I want to take you back to earlier in the year. This was a little exchange between Jamie Raskin and the jacketless Jim Jordan. Check it out.
Mr. Bezos, our investigation...
Mr. Chairman, we have the email. There is no free...
Your time.
Jordan, you do not have the time. Please be respectful of your
colleague.
Someone directly controls the time.
Put your mask on. Put your mask on.
Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Raskin.
Mr. Jordan.
You want to talk about masks.
Mr. Jordan, Ms. Scanlon.
Why would the Deputy Secretary of
Treasury unmask Michael Flynn's
name,
Mr. Raskin? And what I want to know is, when someone comes after my motives for asking questions, I get a chance to respond.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Alrighty, in case you didn't catch that, the jacketless one was pointing out that Raskin's wife, Sarah Bloom Raskin, was on the list that was released in May of names who had been unmasking Flynn dozens of times between 2016 and the inauguration. This features Joe Biden, James Nobody's Homie Comey, John He's a Brute by Brennan, former DNI James Shut Your Yapper Clapper, and of course former UN Ambassador Samantha Power. So that's probably why Jamie Raskin was so rude in asking Jim Jordan to get to masking. And of course Jim Jordan's got his jacket off already. He's like, what, you want to go? I'll suplex you. I will suplex you so hard right here, right now. Chicken wing you or whatever, knucklehead. Next, I want to have a look at a few posts from those guys. But before we do, I want to take you back to my last video entitled 1917. I posted this on October 6th. And in it, we were talking a little bit about the Bolshevik Revolution. I guess technically an invasion, but they call it the Bolshevik Revolution 1917. And a lot of references that President Trump and those guys have made to Red October. But towards the end of the video, I said something and I want you to check it out. See these pictures of what appears to be a missile firing. This was from Whidbey Island. Now let me stop here real quick and point this out, because I know I'm going to get probably a couple of emails showing me this one article of a photographer supposedly doing a debunk on this picture, saying that this is actually a slow exposure of a helicopter rising. I've already done a video 2 years ago debunking that, and if you're the person who wrote that article, come on, man. Come on, man. So don't send me that article. I'm aware of the article. I've already debunked it. If you want to disagree with me, you're welcome to, but we're moving on. Okay, so I posted that video on October 6th. The very next day, on October 7th, we see those guys talking about the exact same thing, post 4829. Do you remember when they told you this was a helicopter? I most certainly do. Was just talking about it. We were referring to this event that happened back in June of 2018. And we're not going to unpack all the details there. I suggest going back to some of the dated videos from June of 2018 if you really want to get the whole story. But I'll try and provide some of it for you. But this appeared to be some sort of missile launch near Whidbey Island. And as you can see right here by the map, in the red circle is where the camera would have been near Skunk Bay. And then up towards the top of your map, that would be the Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. As far as I know, they don't launch missiles from there. But that's what we saw, and we saw this right around the time that POTUS was in Air Force One, and he was talking with Kim Jong-un over there in Singapore. Now let's go to the previous post for 828. Do you remember when the media had wall-to-wall live-in-fear coverage regarding North Korea? Do you remember when Hawaii accidentally sounded the incoming missile alarm? And that was about a year before. It was another missile. What happened? North Korea no longer a nuclear threat? Mountain collapse? You may remember in 2018, North Korea's nuclear test site ended up collapsing under a fifth blast. China seeking North Korea commitment to fire short, long-range ballistic missiles pre-election. Well, we're at pre-election right now, so is that some foreshadowing there? I also want to rememberize you about Elon Musk's joke back in 2017 in December when he fired off one of his rockets and joked that it was a North Korean UFO. I also want to plant this in your head that back in the day, it was Google's Eric Schmidt along with Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico who had gone out there. What were they doing out there in North Korea? Were they setting up some sort of network? What were they doing in North Korea? You may also remember another event in the area not too long after that on August 10, 2018, when 29-year-old Richard Russell hijacked a Horizon Air Bombardier Dash 8 Q400 from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in SeaTac, Washington. Russell was not a pilot, but somehow managed to get the plane, perform an unauthorized takeoff, and have two F-15s scrambled after him. Now, there was some really confusing audio that was released, and if you want to know more about that, I would suggest going back to my videos in August of 2018 to listen to it. But it was very confusing, and it seemed almost planned. The guy seemed very calm, but after about an hour or so in the air, he decided to commit suicide and crashed the aircraft on Ketron Island, which is in Puget Sound. And what was so odd about this whole situation was not just the fact that he was an inexperienced pilot managing to perform this maneuver in the first place and even stay in the air for that long, but his name was Richard Russell. That is the same name as the USS Richard B. Russell, which was a Sturgeon-class attack submarine, the only ship of the United States Navy to be named for Richard B. Russell Jr., who lived from 1897 to 1971, was a United States Senator from Georgia. Well, the Richard B. Russell was used in covert operations gathering intel on Soviet naval movements. A fast attack submarine, as well as a development and testing platform, earned her the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest award any naval unit can be given. She also earned 6 Navy unit commendations and 7 Battle Effectiveness Awards, commonly known as the Battle E. And this was placed in reserve in 1993. It was decommed and stricken from the Naval Vessel Register in June of 1994 and stored at Bremerton, Washington until 2001, where it went to a recycling program in the Puget Sound, the very same place our other Richard Russell crashed and our quote-unquote helicopter/missile was fired. Now let's take a look at this graphic right here. Thanks to Vianon who made this. I'm not sure who to thank for this, but this features a few posts here. And if we look at the one on the left, this is the post we were just talking about, 4829 from October 7th. And we see this correlating to an earlier post on February 15th, 2019, which is right in the center of the graphic where those guys say, bigger than 25th Amendment attempts to remove. Depth of this is very serious. The depth of this is very serious. Submarines can go pretty deep. And we were talking about the 25th Amendment back then because, of course, the Democrats were too. And this Anon is relating this once again to the statement from Nancy Pelosi talking about the 25th Amendment on October 8th. So we know that the 25th Amendment is something that they're probably going to use to try and remove the POTUS. But is this simply just a signal or a distraction from another bigger story very similar to what we saw over there on Whidbey Island? Let's have a look at another series of graphics. And this is featuring post 753 from February of 2018 and post 442 from December 23rd, 2017. That was the same day that Elon Musk fired his rocket rocket that he made the joke about. Think image drop, think original post, think united. What does a bird sing? Everything has meaning. Well, bird sings after a storm, right? But then we see in brackets this I. What is this I? Well, let's follow it down to the lower left, 3717 on December 17, 2019. First indictment, unseal, will trigger mass pop awakening. First arrest will verify action and confirm future direction. They will fight, but you are ready. And then we see this marker and 9 in brackets. Now this Anon is pointing out that I is the 9th letter. So is the I in brackets and the 9 in brackets referring to the same thing? They're pointing it over to Elon Musk's Falcon 9. China, explore further. Post 442, what rocket fired today? Well, we just talked about it. That was Elon Musk's rocket. Iridium. Future news will unlock more of the message. Missing I confirmed. So we know that those guys have confirmed that this missing I that we've seen often is referring to Iridium. And we're going to talk about Iridium in just a moment, but I want to point out a few other references, and hopefully this will connect some dots for you. We see here in the graphics the reference to Falcon, which is part of the SpaceX program. It is also a bird. We see the reference to the number 9, the letter I, which we know refers to Iridium. And we also see this reference that we've seen before from those guys. When does a bird sing? Well, I want to remind you that the United States between 1971 and 1986 had a series of photographic reconnaissance satellites known as the Keyhole series. That's right. And we've also seen those guys reference the Keyhole. Well, oddly enough, Keyhole-9, there's that 9 again, was commonly known as Big Bird. That's right. Otherwise known as KH-9 hexagon. Okay, so we've heard those phrases before. And these Keyhole satellites were part of a series known as Corona, another phrase you've heard before. As a matter of fact, the very next model, the KH-10, was known as Dorian. We just recently had a really funky storm known as Dorian, and you can watch my video entitled Dorian if you'd like to know more about that. But this was all part of the Corona satellite program. And what did they do? They were operated by the CIA. With substantial assistance from the U.S. Air Force. The Corona satellites were used for photographic surveillance of the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China. Two areas that are still in the news today. So this program originated at the Sunnyvale Air Force Station, and in 1958 the Department of Defense directed the transfer of the WS-117L program to the Advanced Research Projects Agency, otherwise known as ARPA. Sound familiar? And the Corona were launched by a Thor Agena rocket, which used a Thor first stage and an Agena as the second stage of the rocket, lifting the Corona into orbit. If you follow me on Twitter, I've done quite a few threads on a lot of these funky dog tweets. Dogs named Thor.
Iridium signed the largest commercial contract ever with SpaceX to launch 10 Iridium Next satellites at a time from the Vandenberg Space Complex in California. With the Iridium Next constellation, Thales Alenia Space has been able to combine its technical expertise with a unique industrial organization, which allowed them to set up a production chain. Iridium Next is now on schedule to fully replace its current satellite constellation and to advance the capabilities of the only truly global communications network further and faster than ever before.
What you just watched was a clip from an older promotional video for Iridium, and they own the satellite constellation of the same name. Iridium Communications provides L-band voice and data information coverage to satellite phones, pagers, and integrated transceivers over the entire Earth's surface. This used to be part of Motorola, and it looks like George Soros has a bit of a stake in this as well. But this is a low Earth orbit constellation, 781 kilometers above the surface, using Ka-band inter-satellite links. And originally they were going to fire up 77 of these bad boys after the atomic number 77 for iridium. Turned out they only needed 66, but they did need help from a couple outside entities. It looks like Teles Alenia got the contract, but it was down between them and Lockheed Martin, who had a big hand in the Keyhole satellite system. And in a lot of ways, this is sort of an updated version of that. They used to actually be manned satellites, and then they went from unmanned, and now it looks like they're doing it this way. But just this year, the Iridium constellation got certified for use in the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. And that actually took away the monopoly that the British satellite telecommunications company Inmarsat was holding. But as you can see, they needed a little help from those Falcon 9 rockets over there at SpaceX, and help they got in January of 2019 when they were finally able to complete the constellation. Now, if this constellation looks familiar, it should, because we talked about a different constellation, which was that of the SpaceX Starlink satellites. We talked about it in this video right here from February 25th of this year, titled Into the Deep. And we're not exactly going to talk a lot about Starlink today, so if you want to know more about that project, please check out Into the Deep. But I do want to remind you of something I talked about in that video, which was in December of last year, the Air Force was working with this experimental advanced battle management system, and it connects air, sea, land, space assets all together, and this was being used with the aid of SpaceX Starlink satellites, and they were using it to link to a Lockheed Martin AC-130 gunship. If that sounds familiar, it should, because those guys have been posting a link to it, firing off over and over and over and over again. So much so that those links no longer work, but there you can see it in action. Now, I couldn't help but wonder if Iridium and this Starlink project would be competition, especially seeing as SpaceX and their Falcon 9 project helped Iridium get theirs finished. But according to Iridium CEO Matthew Desch, that doesn't appear to be the case. That was until recently when Amazon decided to join the game with their project Kuiper, and SpaceX didn't like that so well. They are wanting Amazon to wait until there is another frequency open to be licensed instead of getting a waiver from the FCC. But they did end up getting that waiver from the FCC, and now they're going to have to share that Ka-band spectrum. And this Project Kuiper from Amazon is looking to put up 3,236 satellites, most of this for broadband internet access. Now let me take you through this great thread on Twitter from Julian's Rum. This was from the other day on the 8th. Remember a few days ago when Trump snuck in an I in well, and he's referring to this tweet from the 3rd where Donald Trump had said, "Going well, I think, thanks to you all, love." And it looked like that second L was a little shorter than the first one. So were we looking at that I? Is that I the Iridium that we just confirmed a while back? The day before that, he tweeted about the debate commission. He sure did. He said, "Why would I allow the debate commission to change the rules for the second and third debates when I easily won last time?" Now, remember way back when those guys dropped that interesting tidbit about Iridium, implying a connection between the Satcoms company, North Korea, and SpaceX? Okay, well, I laid some of the groundwork for you just now. Well, Jane Harman is on the debate commission. She's a former Dem rep from California and a former member of the House Intelligence Committee. Oh, would you look at that? She's also on Iridium's board of directors. Nice. How does China calm secure with DNC leaders? How about that? Well, like I just said, we kind of laid some of this out. You kill NASA, prevent space domination, allow bad actors to take down Milsats, worldwide secure comms, install WMDs, risk of EMP space origin, helpless. Those guys, right? So NASA doesn't get this funding, and that's a big reason likely why President Trump is trying to pump up the Space Force. We talked about the possibility of Elon Musk even working out there in North Korea. We definitely know that Google's Eric Schmidt was out there with some sort of network. Was he setting up a network to skirt the NSA? Sure looks like he was. So much of that already points that way, and Julian's run posts this: Iridium Government Solutions provide secure global connections beyond line of sight and out of reach terrestrial networks. By maintaining a long-term partnership with the U.S. Department of Defense, Iridium enables robust, tactical, real-time voice connections and low-latency data through a secure connection. And then he says, keep an eye on SpaceX in the coming days. I believe this new drop and the old drop in the next tweet tie together. And we showed you this already. This was from October 7th, 2020, the day after I was talking about the helicopter, where those guys had said, do you remember when the media had wall-to-wall live in fear coverage regarding North Korea? And remember, those guys have said that Kim Jong-un is not in control of North Korea. Do you remember when Hawaii accidentally sounded the incoming missile alarm? What happened? North Korea no longer a nuclear threat? Yeah, looks like somebody knows about it. Mountain collapse? Yeah, looks like that might not have been accidental. China seeking North Korea commitment to fire short, long-range ballistic missiles pre-election? Yeah, that looks like some foreshadowing. And then we go back over this one here, December 23rd, 2017. What rocket fired today? Iridium message sent. Well, it was actually this right here, nuclear alien UFO from North Korea. That was the joke that Elon Musk was making, but he was actually firing up some stuff, wasn't he? Message back, UFO put out to detract from drops. Yeah, he was just creating a little bit of hype, huh? Well, Julian's run points out that Jane Harman is also a member of the Election Integrity Commission. So this just gets better and better, right? This is the group of deep state trying to help buttress an election coup attempt. She's also co-chair of the Homeland Security Expert Groups, which is a shadow government group of the usual suspects, including General Hayden. And I will leave this thread for you down below so you can read it. He kind of takes you through the graphic that we took you through earlier, but then he adds this at the very end, saying that he thinks it's relevant, and I do agree with you. President Trump announces he won't participate in the next debate after the Commission on Presidential Debates changed it to a virtual debate. Okay, well, knowing what we know now, that kind of puts the reasoning into a little perspective, right? We know Biden's getting a little virtual help, and it doesn't look like President Trump wants to give them any more than they're going to take.
Show of strength not seen since the country entered denuclearization talks 2 years ago. Revealing what experts have dubbed the largest ever road-mobile, liquid-fueled missile anywhere, thousands of maskless North Koreans celebrated the 75th anniversary of the country's ruling Workers' Party. In a speech prior to the parade, the apparently emotional leader Kim Jong-un claimed not one North Korean had contracted COVID-19 and extended his best wishes to the South.
I offer my heartfelt consolation to those everywhere fighting the disease caused by the malicious virus. I pray from the bottom of my heart that health, happiness and laughter for all people will be guaranteed. I also send this warm wish to our dear fellow countrymen in the South. I hope that this health crisis will come to an end as quickly as possible, and that the day will come when the North and South take each other's hand again.
It was a parade undoubtedly intended to boost national morale in a year that Kim himself described as filled with unprecedentedly grave trials and difficulties. 4 years into his 5-year economic plan, the North Korean leader apologized for failing to deliver prosperity to his people. His refusal to hand over any nuclear capability has resulted in international sanctions that have crippled over 90% of the country's exports. The Hermit Kingdom was then forced to close its lifeline border with biggest trading partner China after the outbreak of the coronavirus.
So once again, right on schedule with post 4828, North Korea comes out with the saber rattling. Only this time we've got a biggie. As a matter of fact, it looks like a monster. North Korea unveils monster new intercontinental ballistic missile at parade. Now, we don't really know where they got this. If they've been developing it, then that would suggest to us that they've been able to enrich uranium, which we already knew. Previously, they were testing the Hwasong-15 missile, which of course made nearby Japan very nervous. Their prime minister has recently stepped down. There have been a lot of allegations about his Korean background. But for a long time, North Korea never seemed like a legitimate threat, although this looks like a very big deal. So, did they develop this missile? Did they get it from somewhere else? Was China that somewhere else? Who else was involved? Well, let's go back all the way to post 50 from November of 2017. Those guys say it's a big drop. How did North Korea obtain uranium? How did Iran obtain uranium? Well, we know this through the Uranium One deal. This went up to Canada, it went into the EU, and then Russia, North Korea, Iran, Pakistan. Why did Barack Hussein in the membrane send billions in cash and wire to Iran? Because cash was a lot easier, right? Why the cash component? Was the hostage component a cover for what? Well, you're going to get a lot more information on that right now. Actually, if you go over there to Red Pill's channel, and he'll tell you all about it. He's breaking some big news. I will let him handle that because he's doing a good job of that. Could any of the cash component be handed off to other people? Of course it could. How many planes carried the cash into Iran where it was multiple planes and it was multiple locations? Did it all land in Iran? It doesn't look like it did. Did it all land in the same location? Why is this relevant? Who controls North Korea? Let's ask that again. Who controls North Korea? Who really controls North Korea? Well, we've been told that it isn't Kim Jong-un. Don't think of a single person. Think of a powerful entity. Why is this important? Why are wars so important? Who benefits? What does hostage refer to? Who can be held hostage and controlled by North Korea having miniaturized nuclear weapons? Well, a handful, but the first ones that I would think of was nearby Japan. Whereas Barack Obama today was talking about defending Japan from China. Where is VJ being Valerie Jarrett? Alice in Wonderland. We're not going to go big into the Alice in Wonderland topic, but I believe they would be talking about Saudi Arabia. Generally, when we think about Uranium One and organizations, one of the first ones that's likely to pop into your mind would be the Clinton Foundation, who we know has made trouble all over the world. We definitely know they've been wrapped up with China. And of course, we all know about their involvement in Haiti, which just so happens to sit on massive amounts of relatively untapped iridium. But is that the organization that we're talking about here? Remember, those guys say, think of a powerful entity. Well, I think we're getting clues all over the place. If you check those guys' posts, and you can do this for yourself, but if you just simply type in WHO being who, you will see that often it is capitalized, which leads me to think that maybe we're talking about the organization, the World Health Organization. Well, most certainly they wouldn't be involved with North Korea, would they? Except if you look at their recent actions, that appears to be the case. Back in April of 2020, North Korea reported earlier this week that despite testing and amid quarantining, not one confirmed case of the coronavirus had been found. Not one. So think about that. While other countries are dealing with all these deaths, that's not even the cases. They're not even reporting cases. Now, April 2nd, 709 people, 11 foreigners, and 698 nationals have been tested for COVID-19. There is no report of a COVID-19 case. Well, that seems like a pretty ludicrous claim from North Korea, right? Surely the World Health Organization would jump all over that, except they didn't. They backed it. And they've done this before. The World Health Organization says a report on North Korea's health system by Amnesty International is unscientific and outdated. Rights watchdog Amnesty said North Korea was failing to meet its people's most basic healthcare needs. Amnesty's report is based on interviews with 40 North Korean defectors and foreign healthcare workers. In April, the WHO's director visited North Korea and said its health system was the envy of the developing world. Not just okay, not just passable, but the envy of the developing world. And that is the World Health Organization's director. Director General Margaret Chan said the country had no lack of doctors and nurses. And even though North Korea made this claim, they still received money from the World Health Organization, despite claiming no cases. So, is it possible that it's the World Health Organization that is doing all the benefiting, and they're doing all the money distribution? And is it possible that they are the powerful entity who really controls North Korea? Well, I think many of us understand that the World Health Organization is a suspect operation. POTUS is no different. He has already made the first formal steps to try and remove us from that organization. He tweeted this back in April. The WHO really blew it. For some reason, funded largely by the United States, yet very China-centric. We will be giving that a good look. Fortunately, I rejected their advice on keeping our borders open to China early on. Why did they give us such a faulty recommendation? Well, I think we can kind of see where that's going right now. So is it possible that this is all going right back to the World Health Organization? Sign seems to point that way. Now, having discussed all of this, I want to come back to the original topic, which was the statement from Nancy Pelosi the other day talking about the 25th Amendment. The original announcement where she showed up in her orange citrusy outfit. Well, she's been very fashionable as of recent. In particular, she's been highlighting this local designer, Donna Lewis, who makes all kinds of masks. If you want to go over to Donna Lewis's website, she's over there in Virginia, and she sells them for $27, and she's also got a donation fund in case you want to donate a $27 mask. But there was a lot of speculation as to why she made this orange statement. Is she just making a fashion statement? She just liked the color orange? Did she want to actually send some sort of message? Well, that's where the speculation begins. And oddly enough, this reference to oranges is part of another topic that has long been speculated, and that is the reference to oranges in the movie series The Godfather 1, 2, and 3, in which we see a number of references to the oranges, which led to long-time speculation amongst fans of the series, which has nothing to do with those guys and has nothing to do with the current topic. This was just something that happened. And here you are watching some of the many scenes in which we see the oranges referenced, often with a death following. And although this speculation has been around for a while, I do want to point out that it was director Francis Ford Coppola himself who confirms on one of his DVD series that, quote, "It started out as an accident," said Coppola in DVD commentaries. "But once we realized we had used oranges so frequently in the first movie, we used them purposefully in the others." Well, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And during the first movie, he probably didn't have quite the same budget, so they probably had to reuse it again. So it makes a lot of sense. Once it kind of sticks, they made it a theme. But that was contributing to the movie theory. In reference to what we've discussed, we've been talking about the movie Godfather 3 in particular. And at the very end of the film, Michael Corleone, who fought all this time to keep his family together and lost it all, dies all alone with nothing but an unsuspecting little puppy next to him. And as he passes away, a solitary orange rolls out of his hand. We see a number of references to oranges, usually just as we're about to see a death in this movie series, hence the speculation. And although I think this is interesting, and I've even talked about this movie at great length, particularly Godfather 3 and how it relates to those guys, you can watch my Cardinal Sin series if you want to see that, I'm not so sure this is what we're talking about, and this is why. I want to take you over to this chart known as DORSCON, Disease Outbreak Response System Condition. This particular one is in regard to Singapore, who has just put their country on orange level, if you will, and they're starting to experience some of the things that we experienced a while back with the supermarkets and the shelves and all that kind of stuff. But you can see this all over the world. This one here is from Amarillo, Texas. We are at level orange. Okay, well, let's take a look at level orange. Disease is severe and spreads easily from person to person. Okay, so could this be what we're talking about? Are we upgrading to threat level orange? Doesn't sound like the worst upgrade, but it does seem like it would be a little bit more relevant. And keep in mind, it was Bill and Melinda Gates who were gleefully talking about this possibility of a next wave, which was going to be even worse and even more easily spread. Remember what those guys said back in February of 2019. Bigger than the 25th Amendment. They were threatening the 25th Amendment, but we had a missile launch, and that's much bigger than the 25th Amendment situation. Now we go to October 8th, 4837, oddly enough, colored in orange, and we see this graphic here with Pelosi with the arrows in her quiver. Never bring an arrow in a quiver to a Lulzber missile fight. Those guys said, did you notice the missile within the drop regarding 25th Amendment. Well, we notice the missile now because once again, we're talking about the 25th Amendment, and once again, we're talking about a missile. So it looks to me like whatever it is Pelosi is talking about with these arrows in her quiver, it involves multiple things. And I suppose it's just a coincidence that North Korea, who seems to be getting a lot of aid from the World Health Organization, who would probably be the organization that would step in if we get another threat level orange, which just happens to be severe and deadly and spreading, I imagine it's all just a coincidence. I want to leave you with one last thing, which is an older video of mine entitled Orange Banned Bad. This is from September 23rd, 2019. And in this video, we discussed this really mysterious situation where 3 people died and 4 were hospitalized in Pittsburgh after some sort of party in what appeared to be some sort of drug overdose. But what this really ended up creating was a massive health scare. They weren't sure if something was actually contagious. The interesting thing about all of them was that they were all wearing orange wristbands. And if you watch the video, adding to the intrigue of that story, you will see that the surrounding area of the apartment where this all went down were a number of offices that had to do with immunetrics. And just outside of that area, they were also holding military exercises involving low-flying helicopters. And this was all going down near the David L. Lawrence Convention Center. So please have a look at that video. It's only about 15 minutes long, and it might add a little perspective to what we're talking about today. So there you go, boys and girls. Whatever it is, we're definitely counting down to something, as referenced just recently by Machine Gun Kayleigh McEnany, who just so happened to have a frozen clock, frozen at the same position as that Mickey Mouse clock that we'd seen the other day. Even Chuck Grassley made note of it, saying that it was stuck at 10:10. Now, I should mention that I've had a couple of people who work in the watch industry, and they do say that that is the common setting for any watch, but I can't help but think there's something a little bit more to it. Keep in mind that Amazon Echo Mickey Mouse clock has countdowns and timers and alerts, and we saw the first 8 minutes were set up. So is 10:10 possibly the beginning date to a countdown of something? Well, as always, you decide, but that's all I got for you for today. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. I greatly appreciate all those of you who already do. If you've got information for me, please email me. Please do not DM me on Twitter, but you can email me. If you're watching me on YouTube, all those links are down below. I highly suggest you joining me on one of my other platforms. And if you're old school, want to send me something, my P.O. box is down below. All that stuff is down below. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay focused.